All right, don't forget to kick off Man Cave Thursdays and Blue Chew.
Yeah, man. Hold on for a minute. Let's just get right for a minute, man. Checking my Facebook page.
Purchase your tracks today.
And my Instagram page. And my Snapchat page. We'll get it back.
See you flossing on Instagram. Stay posted on Facebook.
It's the I See What You're Doing podcast. I'm Mr. I See What You're Doing. And as always, I see what you're doing. And always, I see what you're doing. And this is a dark episode, so you can see that I'm in the dark. For those who don't know, I showed up here to do something that I said I would never do. And that's try to make the thing dark or make the podcast feel uncomfortable for anyone that listens to it. But nonetheless, it's uncomfortable in this country anyway. So I guess I'm going to have to do one of those episodes that I never wanted to do because I don't want my podcast to be centered around race. But we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. But before I do, this episode of I See What You're Doing podcast is brought to you by Blue Chew Gold. Fellas, confidence matters, and when you're looking to perform at your best, Blue Chew Gold is here to help. With a simple online process and discreet delivery right to your door, it's designed to make getting started convenient and private. Whether you're looking to regain confidence or simply be ready when the moment counts, Blue Chew Gold offers a modern solution for adult men. No waiting rooms, no awkward conversations, just a straightforward experience from the comfort of your own home. So visit Blue Chew Gold to learn more and see if it's right for you. As always, use only as directed by and consult a healthcare provider to determine whether it's appropriate for your individual health needs. Blue Chew Gold, because confidence never goes out of style. Okay, so I can't say that I'm totally disappointed in the direction of this country because I've been here before. We've been here before. We were here 8 years ago. We all know what happened 8 years ago. We don't really have to say a whole lot, do we? If so, we can get into that as well. But social media and the news, more so social media, is highlighting events that happen around this country that stem from acts of racism. And I know, like I said, I didn't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. And this was supposed to be a three-episode series. I was going to do a series this time. I'm going to try to get through as much of this as I can. And if I don't get through the whole thing, I'll come back and give it to you later. It's touching because in this country, we consider to not have a whole bunch of racism anymore, right? At least that's what we're thinking. But as I continue to watch social media, as I continue to look at the way the world is, and it only seems to be happening when our president, acting and standing president, is in office, that we have to run into these particular conversations, and you get to find out exactly who is really for you and who is against you. I'm not saying that everyone is against everyone. We know midterms are coming up and things like that. We know there's a lot of controversy around midterms, and if the Democrats get the House, whether Trump is still going to be president or whether he can be impeached and all of those things, right? I come to you because I would like to give you factual information, and I don't want to give you information that's not accurate. All the information I give you is fact checked. And with that being said, the question is, and the topic of our podcast this evening is racism in America. Has America changed, or has racism just changed its clothes? Now, the theme for this particular podcast: racism, racial violence, hate crimes, institutional accountability, political polarization, and the continuing debate over whether America is actually moving beyond racism. I will not give you my personal opinion. because then I'll be telling you what to think. Our first story was about our first story is titled "The Noose and Raleigh Lynching History Meets 2026." So the story is centered around a 32-year-old black man who was found hanging from a tree in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a Raleigh, North Carolina parking lot over the weekend because of the man's race and the location and manner of the death. The discovery immediately triggered comparisons to America's history of lynching. But here's a critical fact. The police, before I even said, man, it's funny. So police say they have concluded the death was a suicide. That was stated by Police Chief Rico Boyce, who said investigators found evidence that made the conclusion apparent, and videos collected by investigators supported their determination. The case has nevertheless been turned over to the medical examiner, who has the final say on the cause of death. That distinction is very important for the podcast. You feel me? This is not a confirmed lynching at this particular point, but we already know how that goes, right? It's not a confirmed lynching, but we could possibly go into saying that it is what it is. I mean, hanging from a tree with a noose around your neck has to lead to lynching, regardless of whether who did the lynching or not, or whether it was suicide. And again, I'm not going to lean towards it was a lynching because, I mean, at this particular point, they have not come up with the answer and said that it is actual fact that he has been lynched. But I mean, if you see a duck, it's a duck, and I don't know a lot of people that's climbing and hanging themselves from trees, but I mean, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that considering the climate of the country right now and the way that it's going, getting rid of DEI and trying to erase Black history and all those particular things, it could possibly be a lynching. Hang tight because we're going deeper into this. Now, North Carolina's history, however, makes the public reaction understandable. The Equal Justice Initiative has documented more than 120 lynchings in North Carolina between 1877 and 1950. Why did this happen? There are actually two different questions. First, why did this individual death occur? At this point, authorities say suicide, and the medical examiner determination remains important. Second, why did so many people immediately think about lynching? That is because memory doesn't disappear simply because laws change. Just because you say you're not allowed to lynch someone doesn't mean that it does not still happen. You feel me? Just because someone tells you that the number of rapes went down in the city doesn't mean that the number went down. Just because they tell you that things got better concerning COVID doesn't mean that people are not still affected by COVID. If you understand where I'm going with that. If not, I mean, we can push on because, I mean, there's a lot of information to be covered here. For generations, Black Americans lived under a system where hanging a Black person from a tree could literally be an instrument of racial terror. So when a Black person is found hanging from a tree in the American South, people don't encounter that image in a historical vacuum. You feel me? So, I mean, when you see the hanging, you remember what used to be happening. You remember the history books per them wanting to get rid of history books. It's not for the elders to why they want to get rid of history books. It's not because people are feeling uncomfortable about history books. If you erase the history from history books, then there's no reference to those particular acts of violence and crime. So therefore, you cannot reference back to something and say this is what's happening here, and this is what's happening now. You can't correlate it to anything, and it's not for these generations. It's for younger generations who have not come to who do not have the ability to look into those particular books and look into history books or access that information to know exactly what's going on. You feel me? It's totally part of a reset, and I mean, that's just my opinion. But if you don't have an opportunity to look at slavery and the history that came after slavery, Jim Crow and the civil rights movement, where people were able to use dogs to attack you and water hoses and all types of other violence, burning crosses in yards and shit like that. Those particular type of things that you don't get a chance to take a look at. And then you have to consider that some of the people's relatives in those history books are still alive. And if they're still alive, and it's not about an embarrassment thing, it's about the opportunity for them to want to be able to live that era of history again, make America great again. You know? And I know this is going to be a tough conversation, but let's just keep it a buck. If you're trying to erase history and slavery and African Americans are intertwined in that history, then wouldn't American history be everyone's history? Why does it matter? Why does that matter? And I'm not going to say why does it matter here. It matters because we are a country where everyone in this country is considered to be immigrants. And no one in this country is considered to be superior to another race. No race is superior to another race. The Constitution was written and they said that all men were created equal. And I know that somebody's going to say that does not pertain to this because African Americans were not considered anything but 3/4 of a human at the time. 3/4. Another human being declared that a same genetic makeup and everything is not a human, but more so a livestock. And therefore, they're not entitled to those particular rights. Right? Which is the same thing that's going on now. I mean, you have upper class citizens, middle class, lower class citizens, the elites, the top 1%. It's all separation and division. Segregation at some particular point as well, but all separation and division. Does racism have to be the cause of an individual incident for racism to shape how Americans experience that incident? No. The police investigated it. They said it was suicide. Why are people automatically caught in a lynching? Given America's history, why shouldn't the community demand an extremely transparent investigation? And why shouldn't people think that it was a lynching? Because we've seen this before. We if you've been around, we've seen this before. And if you haven't seen it visually, you've read about it in history books, and they even went as far as to take and put it in cinematics and in cinema so that you can see what it actually looks like. Have you not seen the movie Roots and the other historical movies that depict slavery that were award-winning movies? And if it was so terrible then, if it's so terrible now, then wouldn't it be so terrible then? Now, America does have a complicated relationship with racial history. We don't just inherit laws, we inherit memories. And sometimes those memories affect how communities interpret events happening today. My first question on the podcast would be, when does a legitimate skepticism become conspiracy? And when does skepticism become necessary? Because history has taught people not to trust institutions. And I know at this particular point, somebody's going to say, hey, give us more proof, because that's just one story. And I mean, that could just be an isolated incident. Cool. We'll do that too. The next segment I wanted to go was the news that wasn't a tree. The Golden, Colorado Fire Department incident. This is an event more direct. This is an even more direct racism story. In Colorado City, Black City officials disclosed that a black dog had been found hanging by its neck from a rope in a fire station stairwell. The dog was a snoot on a stoop, a parody of a elf on a shelf. City leaders described the incident as a deeply disturbing racist act. The employee responsible for hanging that dog was fired, but the controversy didn't end there. The city itself came under criticism for how it handled the incident. Denver 7 reported that the city's community engagement and communications director called the initial hanging of the incident unacceptable. And then the fire chief was terminated after the officials said they received additional information surrounding the incident. That's where the conversation gets uncomfortable. A noose is not an ordinary symbol in American history. Let's stop right there for a minute. It's not. A noose is not an ordinary symbol in American history to some people. To others, it is. You can't very well be offended by something that's never happened to you. Like white America, the majority of white America can never ever be offended by slavery, because slavery has never happened to the majority of white America. They've never had an opportunity to know what that felt like. Never. I mean, you have these little spaces where you can go and you can get a chance to feel what it feels like, but that's not the reality of that, because you don't have in your mind the fact or the idea that this may never end and I can never get away from this. You know what I'm saying? So it's not an ordinary symbol in American history. It carries a specific historical association with racial terror against Black Americans. Someone that doesn't have to literally say "I hate Black people" for a symbol like that to have racial meaning. So you don't need. It's an unspoken word. It's an unspoken symbolism that says this is how we feel about you. Like burning the cross in the yard. We know what that means. You feel me? We know what that means. We know what that means. Marching down the street in white sheets and hoods, we know what that means. We know what those type of actions are supposed to trigger and cause and stir up in us and the memories inside of us as Black people. And it's psychological warfare. It's not physical warfare. It's more so psychological warfare. I know the hangers and everything are more of a physical warfare, but there's a psychological warfare in that. But we also have to distinguish between the act itself, the intent behind the act, and the institutional response to the act. Those aren't necessarily the same things. Why does that matter? The biggest issue here is may actually be what happened afterwards. When an organization discovers racism, conducts inside its own wall, racism. When an organization discovers racist conduct inside its own walls, America wants to know, was it reported? Who knew? How long did they know? Who investigated? Because for you to have those investigations, you have to have someone who's neutral in the situation. You feel me? Someone who's going to be unbiased about what they're investigating. Did that person have discipline? Like, could this person have been paid off to say this? Could this person have been given hush money to not say anything at all? Was the public informed? Did the public say, did the news and everybody give out the right story? Were they given all the information of what happened, or just bits and pieces? Because most of the time, when you're dealing in these particular arenas, when you're dealing with the news and all that stuff, you don't get all of the facts all the time. And were the employees protected from retaliation? Because when that happens, communities come together and band together. And I'm not saying it's right to retaliate. What I'm saying is, when those type of things happen, not only retaliation, but the mental health behind it. The mental health behind it is different. You know? The mental health behind it is different. And because racism isn't only about the person who commits the act. But racism is about the person committing and the person who is the act is being perpetrated against. You know, and in these particular times, the thought is that there's going to be this revolution and there's going to be this retaliation, right? And let me just pause right there for a minute. Let me find out. So if you ever had a thought about it, because I've never had to think about it, but I'm thinking right now. I've never been forced to think about it. I've thought about it more than numerous times, but I never thought to ask anyone. So in this particular instance, I would like to ask you a question that you would think about. And feel free to go into my emails and send me your answer. It's the Iseewhatyoudoing Podcast at gmail.com. And here's the question. Has anybody ever said and gave a ironclad specific answer on why Black Americans are the most hated individuals on this planet? Men, women, children, whatever. Like when you go to get slaves from another country and you bring them to this country, whether it's under the premise of better jobs, a better life, or whatever. What was the egregious act perpetrated against the rest of the world that caused all other nations and all other nationalities and races to decide that we are going to slave all of these people. We're going to brutalize them, murder them, feed their children to alligators and all type of other atrocities. What was the atrocious act that caused that kind of hate towards one race? Right? It can also become an institutional problem when people who witness it decide, let's keep this quiet. So the act happens and then people try to cover it up. And I'm sure I know why they would try to cover it up, but I'm sure you know, because if it happens to be too much, then the reality is bigger than the isolated event. The idea becomes bigger than it's just random acts. Then you get to pinpoint exactly where it's happening and who's orchestrating it. Right? What does that mean? This story allows you to ask one of the strongest questions of the night. Is racism more dangerous when somebody openly commits it, or when institutions quietly protect the person who committed it? Right? Let's stop right there. If it wasn't such a big march, if it wasn't such a big fuss about George Floyd, then I'm sure that Derek Chauvin and the police officers those police officers would have got away with that. If it wasn't for the big push against if it wasn't for the big push against Mr. Aubrey jogging down the street and everybody calling for justice probably would have never been served. For Sandra Bland, and that took a long time to happen. And the list goes on and on. I mean, is racism more dangerous when somebody openly commits it, or is it when the institution quietly protects the person who committed it? Question being, police officers covering up, and I'm getting ready to go to some stories. The police officers covering it up. Like this next story, racism inside the police department, the LAPD recordings. Los Angeles police officer Daniel Flores secretly recorded colleagues making racist, sexist, and homophobic comments inside the LAPD training division. According to the Los Angeles Times, recordings included derogatory remarks about Black, Mexican, and Asian people. Flores turned in over 122 recordings to the LAPD Office of the Inspector General, but here's where the story becomes controversial. Instead of simply becoming the whistleblower in the story, Flores himself was charged with 16 felony accounts of eavesdropping because California law generally prohibits recording confidential conversations without consent, which means behind those particular walls, in those particular doors, in the confines of the police department, even these are the people that are charged with protecting their service. You feel me? And this goes back to the question earlier. The beginning, has racism stopped, or has racism changed its clothes? You feel me? Just like was slavery really abolished, or did slavery become did it just take on a new face? Right? These are the people that's charged to protect and serve, do the right thing, uphold the law. And if you're not upholding the law, then that makes you a criminal. And if you're a criminal, then why would you want to be a police officer? Right? Right. So an officer who was trying to do the right thing ended up being charged with pause for a minute. I'll be right back. So in those particular situations, you have a situation where an officer was trying to do the right thing, keep the oath that he took, protect the Constitution, and uphold the law. And because, well, I guess you could say he violated the law, but I mean, it's got to be a bullshit law because, I mean, in those particular places, everything is being recorded. It just depends on who has access to the recordings. I mean, why would you do that? I mean, don't you have to have your body cameras on at all time or something like that? So why would he wrongfully be recording something? Unless that type of information was not supposed to get out, or he wasn't supposed to know about it. But let's go back and see the movies that we've seen where the LAPD was depicted as one of the most racist police departments in the country. And then it'll make sense to you, right? That will fit in. So there you go. And at the halfway point, I want to go back and remind you guys once again, fellas, confidence matters. And when you're looking to perform at your best, Blue Chew Gold is here to help. With a simple online process and discreet delivery right to your door, it's designed to make getting started convenient and private. Whether you're looking to regain your confidence or simply be ready when the moment counts, Blue Chew Gold offers a modern solution for adult men with no waiting rooms, no awkward conversations, just a straightforward experience from the confidence of your home. Visit Blue Chew Gold to learn more and see if it's right for you. And as always, make sure you consult a physician and use Blue Chew only as directed. Remember Blue Chew Gold, because confidence never goes out of style. So as we continue on, the district attorney argued that Flores' own conduct and editing of recordings raises questions about his motives and credibility. Prosecutors also alleged that he participated in some of the conversations and edited out his own comments. So, divide and conquer, slander my name, they throw dirt on me so that I look like I'm involved in it. You feel me? And that's just the way that goes. So, this is not a simple hero versus villain story. This does raise the classic institutional problem. What happens when the person exposing misconduct has also violated the rule? That is a legitimate legal question, but there's another question. Does prosecuting the person who exposes misconduct discourage the next person from reporting it? So, in these particular situations, if you see the consequences of you doing the right thing, or you being the snitch, or you whistleblowing the telling, the next person that hears that story, is that going to be a discouragement to them? Is that going to discourage people, other officers who get sworn in and come into their department? Is that going to be something that discourages them from doing the right thing as well? Is that a bully tactic, maybe? To apply pressure to the newcomers to not to allow laws to be broken by the police, because they could receive correction and repercussions from their actions by people who agree with what's being said and what's in those beliefs. Now, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass criticized the prosecution, saying the racist, sexist, and homophobic comments were unacceptable, and that charging the officer could send the wrong message to people who report wrongdoing. See what I'm saying? Now, racism exists. Let's make that clear. Racism exists. The deeper question is, how do institutions identify racism when the racism is coming from inside of the institution? How do you point out racism that's coming from inside of your department or inside of your establishments? If you would go out in public and say that this is the equal opportunity employee, or there's no double standard, how do you determine what's racism and what's not? How do you determine what's sexual harassment or what's not? How do you determine what's bullying or what not? How do you determine that? Is that by management? Because as I've said before, if it's a manager or management believes in the same ideas of the person who's perpetrating the atrocious act, then here we are. Now, remember, police departments have enormous authority. They can stop people, search people, arrest people, use force, testify in court, and their credibility matters. So when racist attitudes appear inside a police organization, Americans naturally want to know whether those attitudes affect policing. Does your mindset when you wake up in the morning, does your religious and your beliefs outside of the job that you have affect how you conduct and do your job? That's the question that you have to ask right now. Are the officers in these police departments coming from backgrounds where they've always believed in racism or racist tactics, or part of organizations that they understood that if they join these particular organizations or these particular jobs, they have our opportunity to affect other races in negative manners? We could talk about excessive sentencing practices. Do some of the judges that sit on those particular seats use their position to push forward these agendas? Do the officers that ride around in these cars and patrol the streets have a bias to races, and they lean toward or have a affinity for one race more than the other? Do you have a situation where those particular acts, when these particular acts happen, that the police officer determines who's the perpetrator and what race they are, and who's the victim and what race they are, and they go about that, and they determine what who's going to be charged, how the outcome of the case or the investigation is going to go determined depending on race? This isn't an argument that every police officer is a racist. By no means, it isn't. It's an argument about institutional accountability. The real question is, can an institution police itself effectively when the people responsible for exposing misconduct may themselves face punishment? That's the reasoning for the independent committees that were supposed to monitor the police actions. And that's why the police officers did not want those particular committees to exist. That's the reason why that was not an option for them, because if an outside source, unbiased source would be able to look at these particular cases and these particular events and say, yeah, that was done properly, or no, that was not done properly, even inside of internal affairs. Even inside of internal affairs and police officers and police institutions, I don't believe that the internal affairs investigators are unbiased. I believe that there's a scale depending on who it is, which way that they go. But we are talking about racism in these institutions, right? So there's one I wanted to talk about briefly. It was something I saw on social media that spoke about a African American Trump supporter being attacked by white Trump supporter at a Trump rally. Which speaks to the idea that it doesn't matter whether you are Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter whether you're a Trump supporter or not. It doesn't matter whether you're independent or not. Your political party doesn't play in it. The amount of money you doesn't have to have. The amount of money somewhat plays a part in it, but when it all comes down to it, in these particular situations, we don't care about that. We only care about the color of your skin, right? And I know this is what the term hate crimes in America. The question is, are they actually getting better or worse? Is the next spot I want to go to. Now we're going to go over the numbers in this particular situation. The FBI released in 2025 a national crime statistic on August the 26th. It released its 2025 national crime statistics on August the 14th, 2026. And here's an important fact that could surprise listeners. Reported hate crimes actually decreased in 2025. I don't necessarily believe that, but I'm going to continue on. The FBI says and reported that hate crime incidents in its comparable data set declined approximately 7% from 11,404 in 2024 to 11,606 in 2025. Mind you, this is not the number that's going to come out in 2026 or in 2027. Overall, law enforcement agencies submitted reports involving 10,881 hate crime incidents and 13,026 related offenses in 2025. At the same time, the FBI data shows that hate crimes remain a significant national problem. I was waiting on that. This is where we dig into the meat and potatoes. If you had to look at the climate of the world today from your own standpoint, and you had to read it for yourself, and you had to give a synopsis of what you thought racism looked like today and whether it was getting better or worse, what would you say? Would you say that America was getting better or worse? And you don't have to reach out to me on my email. You can if you want to. Again, it's Iseewhatyoudoing Podcast at gmail.com. But I want you to sit for a minute. And when you get a chance, sit somewhere and think about it wherever you're in the world. Think about if racism in your particular state, country, city, town, parish, whatever, has gotten better or worse from 2025 to now. Right? I believe that racism is not worse than it's ever been. I just believe that it's starting to turn back up. So, now, some people are going to say it's worse than ever. Some people are going to say racism is not a problem anymore. The data doesn't prove that racism is not a problem anymore. Why is that? Because hate crime statistics measured reported and recorded incidents. Not every racist act occurring in America. So the FBI put out a number, but that doesn't speak about all that, because you can say you could say it's better, but it could, or it's worse. You can only report what's being reported. And if you're not being transparent and saying and identifying actually what's racism and what's not, then you could brush some of that stuff to the side and say that's not a racist act, and it doesn't go into this database and it doesn't go into these files, and then you don't get a true outlook and you don't get a true vantage point, and you don't get a honest view of how racism really looks in America. Now, all racist acts are not violent, by the way. Let's just be clear about that. All racist acts are not violent, and some of them are not totally brash and upfront and rough. Some of them are silent and subtle. And those are the things that you have to look at. If somebody shows you who they are, you believe them. You don't just stand to the side and say, oh, that must have been some anomaly or mistake. Yeah. And I'm not telling you to hate nobody. This is my disclosure. This is not for you to go out and riot It's not for you to go out and attack anyone. It's not for you to go out and do any of that. What this is a way for you to look and determine whether racism has gotten worse and what racism looks like to you and whether you agree with it or not. Because, I mean, you do have an opinion to decide whether you agree with racism or you don't. So let's keep that in mind. The FBI specifically notes that its trend analysis depends on participating agencies reporting sufficient data. So what I'm saying, some of this information doesn't get reported. Some of it gets pushed under the rug. Some of it gets swept to the side. Some of it gets stated as suicides. And some of it doesn't get reported at all. I'm just saying. Why? So those numbers matter, but they have limitations. Those particular numbers do matter, but they're not the total amount of numbers. Because some agencies probably don't. Some agencies don't report. Now, here's another question for you to think about. Can racism simultaneously be declining statistically while remaining deeply embedded socially? Absolutely. I hate to say that, but it can. A racist incident doesn't have to become a hate crime. A racist comment isn't necessarily a crime. A discriminatory hiring decision may never be reported. A biased interaction may never become part of a government statistic. So numbers are essential, but they aren't the entire story. What does it mean? The responsibility isn't America is more racist than ever, nor is it America solve racism. The responsible position is let's look at the evidence and determine where racism is increasing, where it's decreasing, and where the evidence simply isn't strong enough to make a conclusion. And number 6, who gets protected? The rise of hate against different communities. On August 14th, a man allegedly disrupted a Sabbath service at Central Synagogues in Manhattan, attacked the congregant, damaged religious property, and assaulted a black security guard. Federal prosecutors charged Larry Montez with 2 federal hate crime counts and a charge involving destruction of religious property, resulting in bodily injury. According to the federal complaint, the suspect allegedly directed a racial slur at the black security guard, spat in his face, and head-butted him. The allegations are serious, but remember the legal standard. The charges are allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Unless proven guilty, like shit. Which is a great thing, right? Because that doesn't pertain to everybody. Innocent until proven guilty doesn't pertain to everybody. That's reserved for certain individuals. Racism is not. I want to go deep right now, and then I'm going to get out of your way. Racism in America isn't only a black or white conversation. America has experienced hatred directed towards Black Americans, Jewish Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, Native Americans, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, immigrants, and minority communities. The FBI hate crime data itself tracks bias involving race, ethnicity, ancestry, religion, sexual orientation, disability, gender, and gender identity. The question becomes, can America condemn racism consistently when the victim isn't part of our political or cultural tribe? That's the test. So racism is wrong when it happens to us, but acceptable when it happens to somebody we dislike. And we're not opposing racism. We're opposing being the target of racism. Those are two different things. Joe says, nice show. Subjects were way too touchy for my show. See you next week. Shout out, Joe. I appreciate you. Yo, appreciate you, Joe. I appreciate it, man. What does that mean for America? The challenge isn't simply eliminating racial slurs. It's building a society where Americans don't have to wonder, will the law protect me because of who I am? That's the ultimate question behind every story tonight. I end the show by saying this. America is not 1950. America is not 1850. But America also isn't a country that somehow became completely colorblind simply because segregation became illegal. The current story shows several different phases of racial conflict. A black man found hanging from a tree with authorities saying it was suicide, not a confirmed lynching. A black dog hanging from a rope in a fire station. Police officers recorded making racist remarks. Political violence continuing to threaten America across ideological lines. Hate crimes remaining a significant problem, even while the FBI reports an overall decline in 2025 and hate-motivated violence reaching houses of worship. So the final question for the audience is, has America actually become less racist, or have we simply become better at hiding, redefining, and arguing about racism? And then to take it one step further, what would America look like if we start arguing about racism and whether it exists and started measuring exactly where it exists, why it exists, and what we're willing to do about it? I wanted to end like this here, man. I can remember one time during the Pledge of Allegiance, at the end of it said, one nation under God. And I can remember someone saying that this particular nation was built on Christian principles. And then I look inside of the Bible and begin to look at religion, and it says, love thy neighbor as you would love yourself. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a lot of that happening in the world. Unless I was looking at it through the lens that I was seeing it through, and it wasn't the proper lens. What do you mean by that, Mr. I see what you're doing? If you can't love your neighbor as you love yourself, or if this is considered loving your neighbor as you will love yourself, then there's a lot of people on this particular planet and in these particular countries that deep down inside need to sit down with mental health counselors, because if you have the fortitude and the ability to hate someone with that much passion, and you can't viably say with confidence why you hate those people, then you have self-hate, and that will require you to do a self-check on yourself. Because that would be the only answer. Showing up in religious events and operating under the premise that you're Christian and you can have hate in your heart when you preach and you pray and you give tithes and worship with God, that is love. That distinctly says, love your neighbor. And anything that you do to the smallest of them, you have done to me. And then believe in your heart that there's a heaven or there's a place in heaven for you. You really need to sit down and talk to someone. Because that cannot be the way. But who am I? I'm just a young man who shows up here with this thing behind me that says the I See What You're Doing podcast. And I do this every Thursday at 5 o'clock, sponsored by Blue Chew. And with that being said, remember, Blue Chew Gold. Go to the site. Get you some Blue Chew Gold. Be ready for when it's time for you to deploy your bridge, or you do what you do. And when you do what you do with Blue Chew, and get you some, man. I got me some on the way. And just remember, man, confidence never goes out of style, and neither will I. Shout out to BFAM 109.6 for keeping me here. And until next time, keep your head on the swivel. And if I see you before you see me, remember, I see what you're doing. I holler, man. Y'all be easy.
www.enter-effect.com for more info, beats, and designs. These beats available for $30 and exclusive starting at $150.
Make your next move. Your best move. Shine up with your girl like you might do.